Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. I am Jessica Gaedeke. I'm CRO at GutCheck, and GutCheck is the Agile Human Experience Intelligence company. We help some of the world's most innovative brands identify new ways to connect with the humans they serve on a really deep level. So I'm particularly passionate about today's topic. I'm excited to hear from these brand and insights leaders on the new ways that they are learning about consumers, how they're approaching innovation, marketing, and brand building. So thanks so much for being here today. I'd love for each of you to introduce yourself. So Amanda, we'll start with you.
Great. Thank you, Jess. So I'm Amanda Keller-Grill. I'm from InnovateMR. I'm the SVP of Global Innovation and Product Strategy there. InnovateMR is a res tech company providing products and services for the insights community.
Thanks for being here. Annie, how about you?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon to those of you joining from Europe. Good evening for those of you joining from Asia, and good morning to the US and Canada and Latin America. I'm Annie. I'm joining from Germany, from Adidas, where I head up consumer insights for Adidas Terex, the outdoor CBU of Adidas. And I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Tripp, hi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tripp Hughes. I am coming from Organic Valley, a farmer-owned co-op based here in the U.S. We've got about 1,800 farmers covering 34 states, and we sell throughout. And I've been representing and leading the consumer insights and strategy for, a good bit of the last 20 years here.
Thanks for being here. And Bridget.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bridget Nelson, and I am the head of brand performance and audience research at MassMutual, which is a financial services company based in the Northeast. Glad to be here today.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. And I love the diversity of industries and brands that we each come from. So let's get right into it and start with our first topic that I believe we each have a pretty passionate point of view on, and that is brand transparency and brand purpose. So I'd love to hear from you and talk to us about how can brands bring authenticity, bring transparency, especially as consumers are becoming more values oriented and forming a different relationship with brands. So Tripp, I'm going to start with you here on this question about brand purpose and brand transparency.
Sure. I mean, there's certainly the buzz. I had a friend who commented he was at a chef's convention the other day, and the talk there was about authenticity and about transparency of the food system and food sourcing. And there are so many folks today who are willing and desirous to vote with their pocketbooks, right? So as they're making brand choices, they're making purchasing decisions, they're choosing companies that align with their values. It's their way to participate in ways that we might not have thought about it before. And that participatory action is a key piece. And so it's a huge opportunities for brands to be able to unlock what is that space. And it's not always obvious. Patagonia is out there in the front with some of their big mission-oriented stuff, but a lot of folks can do stuff that's a lot subtler. At Organic Valley, we do a lot of donations to food banks around the U.S., pairing in the food system versus battling. Has always been kind of something our consumers have told us that's who they relate to. That's who they see us as. So it's definitely a huge opportunity for companies and brands to figure out, unlock as they're looking at, how does the product relate to what I'm trying to bring mission wise, authenticity wise? How does the brand and how I'm positioning relate to it? And at the end of the day, how does my corporate responsibility back it up?
Mm-hmm.
If you're not there front and center at the back of the program as you are at the front, then that transparency breaks down. And what we've seen is that transparency doesn't always easily translate to grabbing a lot more consumers, et cetera. But those consumers that are there, the brand love just goes really deep.
Yep. forming a connection in a very genuine way. So that's great perspective. And Bridget, I'd love to hear your perspective on this as well. And I might pony on another dimension to it, which is if part of your brand purpose is really standing for a cause and really taking a stand and speaking up, how can you approach that in an authentic way? And do you have any watch outs or things that, concerns with that type of approach?
Yep. Wonderful question. So picking up on what Tripp said, for transparency, the brand mission at MassMutual is to bring financial well-being to all Americans. And I think for some people who think about the financial services industry, their mind might automatically go to like, oh, that's where rich people get richer, right? In that industry. It's not for everybody. We at MassMutual do not believe in that. We believe that our mission, our brand's mission, and we stand by this with every effort that we put forth to touch those customers, is helping to bring that financial well-being to everybody. And we very clearly articulated that the way to deliver on that mission is not just through sales, is not just through the bottom line of the company, right? We have taken the stance that we almost see the bottom line of the company as a way to fuel our brand mission, right? So we may reach certain audiences via sales, and that's how we're helping bring that financial well-being to them. But we also leverage that to be able to do CSR efforts or community outreach, or really just getting deep and saying, how can we solve this problem? How can we ensure that, for the majority of Americans out there, I think I'm going to get the statistic wrong, but it's like 60 to 80% of them couldn't withstand the $400, what do we call it? That if there was an unexpected expense of $400, they would struggle to meet that. Right. And they would have to sacrifice something. Is it feeding my children? Is it not, being able to buy the bus pass so I can get to work? So there's a lot in there. And again, I think for us, we're also not trying to be, tone deaf and say, hey, person in this situation, please buy a term life policy from us, right? They're triaging every dollar every day. So for us, it's really that deep belief in that brand mission that is really kind of helping bring that to everybody. We believe in that and we will do that. So I think from some, in terms of watch outs, I think my biggest push is for, brand marketers or, our colleagues out there is don't think about the brand as just a way to drive more sales or more bottom line, right? That cause-driven piece of it is just as important. And dare I say, the whole world went through a huge disruption with COVID, and they're reevaluating values and, everything, and new behaviors are emerging. And it's very, 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 very important that we, bring that to the table, because they're even more discerning than they were, pre-COVID days. So I think too, it's this idea of being society centric and just thinking about what you stand for is an expectation now, whereas 10 years ago maybe that was a nice to have.
Very well said. Annie, do you have a point of view on this?
Sure. I love the way you tied in, Bridget, with how the mission isn't just about one thing. So for instance, if I think of Adidas Terex, what is our, let's say, mission? What is our obvious mission? Is to take more people into the outdoors, to enable access into the outdoors for more people, for younger generations who are not used to thinking of the outdoors as a space for them. But it's also doing that in a way that is friendly to the planet. So our mission is not only to do that for the people, but also for the planet. So that reconsideration of your role as a brand, not just in relations to consumer, but to the environment as a whole. That's another perspective that more and more brands are adopting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's so true. And Bridget, something you said really struck me and will help us get to the next question here. And that's that the expectations of brands have just changed forever. There's a different level, a different threshold you have to display and really commit to. So So I'm curious, I'd love to go to our next topic, which is, given the rapid pace of change and consumer expectations changing so dramatically, how have you adapted your approaches to capturing timely insights, but also they're very relevant to the moment? So Amanda, I'll start with you here.
Yeah, I think this is such an interesting thing because just in the last couple years, the rapid changes just escalated so much with the onset of COVID-19, in that people want things faster and faster and faster, and attention spans are shrinking. And there's a new statistic from the Harvard Business Review that Americans now have a shorter attention span than a goldfish. So we've got 8 seconds now that people are giving you attention. And so everything is just changing so quickly. So I think the real key for brands is customer centricity, right? You have to be on the pulse of where you are, what your consumers think, where they're at in their journey. And really the most important is to meet them where they are. I think in the past, especially technology, you could create a technology or a product and expect your customers to come to you. But now the expectation is kind of reversed with everything going so quickly, as you are expected to meet them where they are, where they work, where they're at in their life. And that makes things and finding them more and more difficult if you're not so ingrained in the product life cycle and where your users are at, where your product, lovers are, and meet them there. So I think, in terms of capturing them where they are, pulse insights have never been more important. And just really staying on top of everyone who touches your product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you mentioned pulse insights. Another thing that we had talked about as a group is just the new data sources that are available to us and the new technologies that are available to us. So Annie, what are some of those new methods or data sources that you're leveraging?
I love also the term pulse insights, because in consumer research or in product development, we talk a lot about trends. What are some of the mega trends? What are some of the defining trends and vectors of an industry? But actually what you have to be more in tune with are these pulses, these very timely waves of events or things that people are thinking about, or if you are, let's say, a more traditional brand, within 6 months, you've missed the boat. If you're not responding to that pulse, you're out. And this is where actually having a diversified portfolio of data sources, from internal sources to your external sources, from trend prediction, from big data, from big data applied to both, let's say, social media analysis, but also things that look at quant data that put that into perspective and also transform the behavioral signals into trend signals. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where what that allows the companies with the infrastructure well thought through to stay ahead of the game. And sometimes it's not really to stay ahead of the game, it's almost like to see to know how to navigate the environment, because the environment is changing so rapidly, and sometimes the predictions are like you have to keep several scenarios in mind. You have to be prepared for different ways of events developing, rather than just watching where things are going or watching the growth trends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's so true. And looking at, organic commentary out there where people are talking about their authentic experiences is another great place to look when you're trying to connect and trying to develop innovation. So I'd love to talk about innovation next. And because Annie, what you just talked about is this, notion of how can we future-proof some of the ways that we're looking at insights to make sure that we're innovating in a way. And the innovation equation has almost been reshuffled, whereas before it used to start in this space of novelty and invention. Now things are changing so quickly that we're more reactive to pain points and the needs that consumers are talking about in the moment. So how have you adjusted your innovation approaches when historical data has become unreliable in many cases? So Tripp, I'd love to start with you here. How have you adjusted how you think about innovation?
Yeah, it's this balance. I'm lucky to work for a cooperative of farmers who are very well grounded, right? And this mix of the speed, the pulse that's happening, the team members wanting to react quickly and be on top of it, balanced with this kind of farmer vision of look at the history, look at the cycles. I mean, the reality is there are pulses, there are trends, but there are cycles too, right? And so understanding how all of those components to fit, right? And quite often the pulses may be used to put window dressing that's current on a benefit that's got a longer time frame to it, right? And so I think part of my work is to pay attention to those pulses for sure, but also make sure that those pulses aren't pure distraction at the same time, right? And that we have this sense of what the benefit is, what's the key insight that we've locked on to. Is that fundamentally changing? Quite often not, but there may be some nuances to it now that we're going to read through the pulse, that as we bring it to life through a specific message or what have you. So it's about mixing all of these components together and finding that right balance. I happen to be in an industry that isn't quite as fast change in terms of what the consumer expectations are with the end product, and quite often with the brand. So I don't have the same challenge where Adidas and Terex, having to come out with an entire new line every year. That kind of blows my mind, but yeah, so.
Yeah.
Twice a year, we have 2 seasons.
Geez, yeah, that's a whole nother level.
Bridget, how about you? I mean, on this topic of innovation, but also what we were talking about previously, like, what do you think?
So I was thinking about what Tripp and Annie were saying around new data sources and how we can, activate off of them. I think it kind of highlights for us in the research industry kind of this macro trend that's happening, right? It's less about before, where it was like you had researchers doing research, right? I think that the shift is now more of a holistic approach, looking at different data sources. The focus really being on storytelling and translating all of that data. And, Annie was saying big data, pulse data, all of that has an impact on the talent that we need to recruit for. So historically, it was usually, I need to hire a researcher. So I need to make sure that they can, draft surveys and, maybe moderate, et cetera, et cetera. Fast forward to now, I'm looking for a analytics researcher who can do what I just said, but also can write SQL and can wrangle some of the big data. So I think too, it also highlights this idea of like this macro trend as we're talking about trends within our own industry. And again, it's been an interesting, thing to watch. And then you throw in there, the Great Resignation and, this idea of like how much more selective individuals are with, where they're going to work, which I completely support, but it's just, it's made it very interesting. So.
Yeah, Bridget, I love what you just said there. And I think it kind of speaks to the disintermediation that's been going on in the space, where there's a lot more brands that are doing a lot more research. And so people's skill set and what they're required to do keeps changing. And all the while, there are just so many tools that are required for insights that you're using. And that kind of does prohibit this speed, right? If you're using, it was 5.4 tools that people are using to complete the research cycle. And then that's inhibiting your speed. And then everyone's required to do so many different and have so many different roles. So it seems like, for everybody and for brands to kind of get ahead, one, you have to have like ability to get to data quick. And then also in terms of innovation, you have to be scalable for future change. That seems to be an inevitable for anybody in the research space and products and any product is you have to be scalable because things are changing so quickly, and that will keep you able to be more nimble.
Yeah. And what you just said is here to stay, I believe, right? Like it's never going to go back to the way that it was. And so we must adjust, we must move forward and must adjust. And it's going to take a lot of cross-functional disciplinary, learning. So I think that all of these are so interrelated, which I really appreciate through the conversation. Quick plug.
I have one quick build. It's one of my former mentors had a great kind of line that stuck with us, which was, I need more information, just less of it. And, that was 20 years ago. And you look at the pipeline flow of information at us now and the ability to sort out what's relevant and what's critical to understand. Like, I mean, talking about the additional talents, that talent of being able to read that information, to your point about analytics, and convert it into, I need strategic thinkers. I need folks who understand how it all ties together, not just like how to execute it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Quick plug to the audience. Please put any questions that you have for the panel in the live Q&A, and we will do our best to prioritize those within our limited time we have. So I'll throw out one other topic that I think is really interesting, and that is the extreme differences that we see within different segments of the population. So one example might be generational differences. We actually recently conducted some research where we learned just how different it is based on generation, your outlook on the economy, how you're looking at your spending, your outlook on mental health, emotional outlook. It's just so different when you compare, for example, boomers and Gen Z. I'm curious how each of you think about building an empathy to different consumer segments as you think about marketing and innovation. Annie, do you have a point of view on that?
Sure. Thank you for addressing this question to me. And actually, this is kind of where I had an example where we took a different approach from, let's say, the rest of the brand. And also going back to our brand values. As a brand, one of our brand values is to be inclusive. How can you stay inclusive if you exclude a generation or a group of consumers or prospective consumers from your research? And whilst you certainly want to be future-proofing and you want to be resonating with Gen Z who are loud, who are proud, you can also stay true to your core and to, let's say, be inspiring for future generations by broadening your research base, at least, if not your storytelling base, to include everyone. And let's say that's one piece. And then another piece, which kind of goes back to the days when I was doing more analytics, but at the same time, like you're after the needle in the haystack. Sometimes being not inclusive, but literally, like not necessarily not inclusive, actually being inclusive is looking at the data in depth and not necessarily looking at waiting for a validation, but looking how insightful or how unique is that point of view and adding it into your perspective. That's also about inclusivity. And that's sometimes, of course, to do with generations, but there are so many diversity spectrum facets that we need to put together that age is just kind of the most obvious one.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd build on that, Jess. We've had the challenge of thinking about inclusivity. We play in some really high penetration categories, and some of the learning lessons we've had is, making sure you've got the right level of sensitivity as you go for that inclusion. So it's one thing to make sure that, yes, I'm missing something and I need to be more inclusive, but two, of really making sure you've got that deep understanding of what that inclusion looks like, right? You can't always fit it to the way you want it to be. And, I can think of a campaign we did a few years back where we thought, wow, we nailed this. And we just got, taken apart by some groups, right? And yeah, that's a great learning lesson again of like, okay, make sure it's not just about inclusion, but it's inclusion in their reference.
Yep, absolutely. Bridget?
I was just going to say real quick, I know we're running low on time, but following up, with what Tripp and Annie were saying, it's also the idea of like, what is the role of your brand in all of this ecosystem? So again, it goes back to, it's not just about the sales. A lot of times we're doing brand advertising to build the brand, to future-proof it, right? So I'll give you an example from financial services where we can all probably think of an archetype of somebody who is a financial services client, right? It's probably like pre-retiree, they're, getting ready to retire right at that moment in their life. I'm not saying that that's not what a lot of, financial services companies' book of business look like. It actually is. But for our brand, it's about future proofing, right? So yes, we want to make sure that we are not offending or kind of they're comfortable with our messaging, but we're also looking for, our brand to do another job, and that speak to the Gen Z, speak to the millennials, speak to Gen X, but we need that deep understanding of them. Even if they're not a customer today, they could be in 20 years or 15 years or 5 years or whatever that is. So I think it's this idea of like, insight and foresight, right? So we can get insights from the existing customer base, and then we have to bring in research, all of that for that foresight for the job of the brand, because brands are so powerful and they can do multiple jobs.
Yep. Yeah. And to that end, since we are almost out of time, I'd like to close with that, which is if you could use one word to describe the new world and one word to describe brand's role in it. Let's conclude there. Amanda, we'll start with you. We're going to rapid fire these.
Okay. New world, I'd say expeditious. And brand's role in it is to engage.
Mm-hmm. Good. Annie, how about you?
The word to characterize the new world, accelerator, and brand's role, catalyst.
Good one. Tripp, how about you?
The new world's wide, and we're looking to find that intersection, right?
Yep. Bridget?
The new world is, I'm going to say exciting. And brand's role is to be, I think there's an element of society centricity. I don't know if that's a real term, but I'm making it up.
It is now. You just did
Customer centricity to society centricity.
Great. Thank you guys so much for your wisdom and your passion today. I really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you to the audience members for listening in.
Thanks for leading, Jess.
Yeah, my pleasure.